and just inviting us to dance, to sing, to laugh, to connect, to feel inspired, to really inspire all the audience into action. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I want to share with you that I've got so many planets in Virgo, I can't even tell you. So I'm a very organized, prepared person. And today, all day, when I went to go and prepare, I just kept getting nah. And then listening to you talk just before, I just went, okay, I get it. Like this is a moment of authentic, present connection. And that's what I'm really grateful for and intending for this conversation with you, and for us to have this time finally. It's like we're finally getting to really dig deep, and I'm really
Wow.
that. And so let's have fun. That's what I want to do, Leslie. Let's have fun.
Amazing. Okay, it'll just take me a minute to set this up.
Go for it, Tom.
And I kind of talk at the same time as I'm doing it, and so just don't mind me. I say lots of weird things. So share in a group. Love in quarantine. Next. All of me with gratitude and acceptance. Sexy chats. Love codes. Say hello. Chats. Need a capital there. Okay, so love codes. Say hello. Okay, we're going in live in about 3. Welcome to Sexy Chats with Claire, talking all things love. This is our final interview of our 8-week series in conjunction with online dating show Love in Quarantine. Feeling a little emotional saying that this is the last interview, but we have a ripper of a guest, a very sexy, wise, wonderful woman. Belinda Bailey, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Claire. Hi, everybody.
If you're watching live, thank you so much. If you're watching the replay, please join in the conversation. We welcome lots of questions. We welcome you to participate in the conversation. So, Belinda, how's your love in quarantine journey been so far? I know you've been watching the show throughout the last 8 weeks.
Yeah, I sure have. Whoa, what a ride, huh? How was last week? Epic. It was epic and beautiful. I mean, your own sharing and your own process in there was really beautiful. I think I sent you a message about that, just how wonderful it was to see. And that you're really setting a precedent, I think, for all of the participants, and the participants themselves too, just being so open and so courageous to grow. And I mean, what a show, right? I mean, I think I watched The Bachelor once. I did nearly vomit. I'm pretty sure I nearly vomited. And just the way that they do these ridiculous shows, and to see something like this where people are going through a journey and growing from it and learning about themselves, it's just, I mean, what an amazing thing. And I know a lot of people are going to have withdrawals.
Oh, thank you so much, Belinda. And what are you wildly passionate about at the moment?
Wow. Let's see. Well,
I'm a show girl out there, Belinda. Get the actress out there.
Well, it's funny, actually. I was speaking with my girlfriends recently how I've been passionate about reigniting my own passionate self. So that's one part of it. But I think, you know, the thing that I'm really passionate about, and the thing that I'm always just focused on and can't stop working on and talking about, is relationships, clearly. But even more than that, it's like how we can make relationships a crucible for love and evolution. So how do we marry being in a relationship, being in a long-term relationship, and also being devoted to our spiritual path? I know for so many of us that can be something that is in conflict, and it needn't be. And so in my own relationship and in the relationships that I work with people, with couples and with women, we're always finding a way, how can we be our highest evolved self and still have a relationship that works? Because let's face it, when it comes to the day-to-day, there's day-to-day things like paying bills and food and kids and cleaning and boring shit, right, that we've got to do. And how do we manage that at the same time as having a pure devotion to a spiritual path and always growing and evolving as a person? So how do we bring these two things together? And not only how do we have them allow each other, but how do we have them support each other so that both are growing? And there are really beautiful ways to do this. And so I guess that's the thing I'm most passionate about always.
Amazing. Well, I am so excited that you are going to be on Love in Quarantine this Sunday evening for the last episode, and that we get this opportunity to really dive deep into the love codes and all things attraction this evening. And with all of the interviews, I've been introducing all the guests really just from my heart, and not really talking about the professional bio, but more just how your words speak true to me. And I remember stalking you probably about, let's say about 5 years ago. I was single at the time, and I wasn't necessarily looking for a love coach, but I was stalking all of the love and intimacy, peeps out there. And you were definitely on my radar. And so I checked out your website a few times, and, I'd read some of your blogs and stalked you on Facebook. So I definitely knew who you were. And I also had friends and colleagues who had actually worked with you and had said so many amazing things. So you were definitely on my radar if I was looking for a love coach. And so I just always knew that you were around. It was like, if I need a love coach, this is the woman to go to. And then I think it was maybe about 3-4 years ago, and you had put a post on social media saying that you were wanting to get back into acting. And who do I need to talk to? And someone actually then tagged me in the post. And I was like, oh, it's the love coach. And so then I messaged you and said, I know lots about acting, what questions have you got? And so you started interviewing me. And I was like, well, I'm going to start interviewing you. And then we caught up for coffee. And then we became friends. And it was like, oh, this is amazing. So, we've known each other for quite a long time now. And I've always wanted to interview you, and it's just never aligned to the topic, because you know me, like I'm always, multi-passionate about so many different topics. And, but just now is like the perfect timing for us to be actually having an interview together, because obviously God has just said, Claire, you need to create a online reality dating show. And I was like, well, this is the perfect time to be having my interview with Belinda. And I am so excited to have you on the last episode, because I know how much valuable information you will share with the participants on Sunday evening leading up to the final crystal ceremony.
Wow. No pressure, Belle. No
There's
pressure.
big pressure. I remember saying to you, I'm like, most people that haven't even watched episode 2 to 7 will come back for episode 8. So I knew I need to have a fab guest on for the last episode.
All right, bring in my A game.
Yeah. So I don't know that much of your earlier story that's actually led you to being a relationship coach and working with singles and working with couples. I am so excited to be sitting back and getting to hear your story before we delve into attraction, love codes, and also the audience and women on the show have left a lot of questions. So we'll try and get through as many as we can.
Right.
And definitely for the audience, definitely keep participating in the conversation and asking any questions because Belinda has a wealth of knowledge.
I love questions. I'm used to it now with my 4-year-old. That's what he does for a living. How did I get to where I am? I'll give you the short version. I did a lot of, I knew that I wanted to get into psychology or something like that when I was young. And so, and then in my early 20s, I did a lot of spiritual evolution, a lot of spiritual development and education. I went very, very, very deep in a few different areas. And then I was about to go and do psychology simply because I wanted to have a ticket to be able to work with people. And then I was going to use everything that I knew. And then I found transpersonal psychology. And I was like, wow, this is great. So I lied about my age to get into the course, and I did. And I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. And I started working as a therapist. And so early on in my career, I just attracted people who were there to talk about love and relationships. That's just what came to me. And so I developed that skill and I loved it, and I developed that interest, and I seemed to have this kind of uncanny gift in that area. It was obviously, I would see patterns, and I see patterns in people and in relationships that, you know, someone kind of just walks into the room and I almost can see it already falling into place. And I loved what I did. And then so then I started to focus on relationships really, and furthered my education in the area. And then I was married, and that relationship turned to shit. It was awful. It was great in the beginning, then it was a real disaster. And I was 30 something and single. Now, I don't know how many women who are watching this can relate, but if you're 30 something and suddenly single, it's scary, right? It's scary, especially, not only, but especially if you were thinking you're going to have a family. So you're like, biological clock's ticking, all the good men are gone. Oh shit, what am I going to do? And all my girlfriends are already, whatever. You know, it was just this awful state that I'd never wanted to be in. And after freaking out for a while, I kind of slapped myself in the face and said, well, hang on, you're supposed to be a relationship coach and a relationship educator, you know, get it together, Belle. And I have, you know, I thought I have all this wealth of knowledge and experience and skills and all this kind of stuff. I should be able to work this out. So I started to take everything that I had and look more deeply. And I started to look at, specifically look at women who were in relationship, who excelled at relationship, and started to see what the patterns were and what the commonalities were. And I just devised a few tools, and processes, and I tried them on myself, and I had these really profound outcomes for me. And so I started sharing them with my girlfriends and then with clients, and it just grew from there. And that's how the Love Codes was written. Basically, it's a 6-module program where I teach these things, and you know, this is where the transformation comes from. So that's the short version of how I got here.
And you're also now remarried.
I am.
So obviously these new tools worked, because I remember, because that was when I was stalking you, and it was in the early stages of the new relationship, and you were sharing it all. And now Caleb's how old? 4.
Yeah.
And now has your relationship gone through lots of different transitions with motherhood?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, this relationship, this marriage is just the most beautiful gift. It honestly is. And it's so much from my own making, and my husband as well, who steps up to meet me. But and yes, it continues to go through transformations. And I was just saying to you earlier, Claire, how, 4 now Caleb is, and it's like all of a sudden we're getting a little bit of space to focus on each other again and bring back that attention to each other that really dwindles a little bit in those first few years. And I've been since downloading the templates for the next program that's going to be specifically for people in long-term relationships, and especially people who have kids. But transformation galore, hence why I'm so passionate about relationships being that crucible for evolution, because it really is, like, that's what they're supposed to be, and they can be when we know how.
And you've been working with singles, predominantly women, for a long time. What would be the biggest challenge that you see single women coming to you with?
Great question. So the majority of the women that I work with, I think we need to clarify that, is they're usually women who are quite powerful in themselves. They've done a lot of self-development. When you do my work, it starts really deep. So women who are attracted to it, and there's a filtration process. So generally they come to me, they've done a lot of self-development. They're pretty powerful in themselves. So they're not shrinking wallflowers. They're generally, the issue that women like this have is that they find that they can't find a man who is able to meet them. If we were going to boil it down to one thing, I would say the biggest issue is that they can't find a man to meet them or commit in the way that they want them to.
I think that's why I thought you were so perfect to come on for the last episode, because I feel like all of the women on the show are so powerful, and women in the community and men in the community as well that are watching the show. So many have done so much personal development and so much work, but just haven't found that person to meet them. And I've got lots of questions along the way that we can delve more into that. But I know a huge topic that we're going to focus on this evening is attraction. And so for anyone watching, any questions that come up throughout this conversation, please participate. How about just initially, what is attraction?
Yeah, right. It's such a good question. I hope everyone just stops for a minute and ponders that. What do people even stop and think, what is attraction? And this is why it's such an important topic, especially, and it's not just if you're single, actually, it's if you're single or in a relationship, because attraction is, it affects your relating, whether you're looking for someone or already in a relationship. And attraction, really, literally, it's when you want to be near something. That's what attraction is. Attraction is when I want to be next to something. Most people know when they feel attracted to somebody. They don't know necessarily how they know. Some people might, but generally people don't know how they know. And the other thing that most people don't know is why. Why am I attracted to that person? And so what is attraction? Well, this is why in my program we've kind of categorized attraction into 6 different categories, because the way that we're attracted to somebody differs for so many people, for everybody, there are kind of areas where people generally fall into, and they differ greatly. So they can range anywhere from the first kind of initial type of attraction, which is genetic attraction. This is based on chemistry and a good DNA match. So it's when you're, in your body, you get a chemical reaction that says, yep, there's a good DNA match here, all the way up to the other end of the spectrum, where it turns into something electrical, where there's a more refined energetic compatibility. And this kind of signifies that you'll have a relationship that's based on more evolutionary principles. And then there's everything in between. And those in between types of attraction can be educational, at best, and extremely destructive at worst. And I know that everybody's probably, experienced a few of these, but we tend to lean toward one type of attraction more than the other. So when we say what is attraction, generally, like the baseline, it's when we want to be next to something, but it's varied. It's really, you can't say it's just one thing.
Mm-hmm. And so you say that there's sort of 6 categories of attraction. And I know that you've actually created a quiz for our audience actually to take so that they can actually hone in and actually find out more about their own attraction type. Can you tell me more about this quiz?
Sure. The quiz it's an excellent quiz. It's simple, but it's by answering a few questions, we're able to get an idea or an insight into the psychology of each person to see where they lean towards. And when you do this quiz, you'll get an idea of your type. So when you know what your type is, everyone that does this, I've done this before with a live group, and people just going, oh my God, like it's those moments, that aha moment, and you'll see so clearly why this has always happened. So why have I been attracted to this kind of person? Why do I keep being attracted to this kind of person? Why does my relationship end up in this position? And there are some attraction types that feel really good, like they don't feel bad, but they always end up in the same position, which isn't where you want it to be. And it just really clarifies that. And the great thing is that once you know what your attraction type is, you can work with that and you can work around it and you can change those programs. And even if you're in a relationship, so it's not just for singles, this is for people in relationship too, because what we find when you're in a relationship is when you change your own kind of energetic imprint, then that has an impact on the quantum field of the relationship, so the pathways of the relationship. So when you know your type, you can work with it basically.
Mm-hmm. So if you are watching live or you're watching the replay and you actually want to access Belinda's quiz, then just put in the word attraction and we will make sure that we email that quiz to you. We've also got a special prize for one person as well, but we'll talk about that later on in the sexy chat. But yeah, I just thought that I would just put that out early, that you have created this amazing quiz, and I'm looking forward to taking it myself. So my relationship with attraction is that through doing my big thing that I did was the 4-man plan. So for me, it was changing from being all eggs in one basket towards this person I was hugely attracted to, that usually always didn't end up going very well, to then varying the type of people that I dated, to then now being in a relationship with a man that definitely at the start I wouldn't have thought was my type and wasn't someone that I was initially attracted to. And what's so funny is that throughout the course of us being together, there's been other attractions. And I've allowed myself to be friends with these people and actually follow my heart with that attraction without actually turning it into something physical. And always down the track, the universe shows me why they wouldn't be a good partner for me. I would love to hear your insight around my story.
Well, okay. I'd love for you to do the quiz. I want to know where you're at now. I'd say you've reprogrammed yourself to the 5th type of attraction, which is native attraction. That's my guess. So when you do the quiz, I'm going to see if I get it right. Yeah, well, look, it's not uncommon. That's not an uncommon thing. One of the more kind of, let's say, unevolved types of attraction is really where most of us lie, and that's because it's based on chemistry. So probably what's been, and it's really hard for me to say unless we delve more deeply into it, but I would say that you're probably you were dipping into a genetic attraction or aesthetic attraction. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that genetic attraction, what happens is, and interestingly for you especially, because you haven't been sure if you wanted to have children. So this is a really good example of how an unevolved level of attraction can really screw with us, because our bodies are designed to have a chemical response when we are in the vicinity of another person who has the type of chemistry or the type of DNA that would have a good match with our DNA to make a healthy baby. Now, this was important back in the day when, we didn't have modern medicine, and childbirth was literally a life-threatening thing. But these days, it's not the same. It's not necessary. And not only that, not everyone wants to have a baby, right? So this is clearly not a good type of attraction to be trusting if you don't want to have a baby and if you've got modern medicine, which we do, because it doesn't take into account at all personality compatibility. So it's possible, Claire, that that's a genetic attraction for you. And another one of the styles of attraction that it could be is aesthetic attraction. So aesthetic attraction is the second style of attraction. And what this is based on is what I like to call the perfection projection. So, when we're growing up, we build our model of what a relationship is supposed to be based on just hearing myself. I'm thinking this probably isn't yours, knowing your parents, but anyhow, it might be, or knowing your relationship with them. But we grow up, we have to build a model as to what a relationship is supposed to be. And for most of us, our model of relationship comes from our parents. And for most of us, their relationships were screwed. So because of that, we unconsciously build a model using the imagery around us. So that usually is things like TV programs, magazines, songs, basically a fantasy, the whole Disney fantasy. And so then what we do is we carry around unconsciously with us this idea of what it's supposed to look like. So what they're supposed to look like, how they're supposed to speak to us, the whole kind of aesthetic, right? And so what happens is, and we're unconscious of this, but what happens is when we meet somebody who fits that perfection projection, then we get a click, and then we feel attracted to that because that fits the model of what I believe a healthy relationship is supposed to be. And these are always short-lived, because in the end, they don't end up clicking or meeting you on that space where you really need to be met. And that's another really common attraction.
I feel like that one is me.
There you go.
Just because my teenage girl definitely knows what she wants to create in her life when it comes to a relationship, and it's a big Hollywood fantasy.
Yeah.
And that is why I did the 4-man plan, because I really just wanted to drop the fantasy. And yeah, so it's been interesting then going into a relationship with someone where there wasn't the fantasy, but there was this healthy connection.
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily the same spark that I had experienced with other more short-lived or even some longer-term relationships as well, because I think we were both really living in that fantasy together. Like I've had a relationship for 4 years, and for the first like about 10, 15 years ago, and the first 2 years really did feel like a honeymoon period. And, then it just slowly shifted. Yeah. But that was one of my questions was, does the honeymoon period actually exist? And is there a way to keep the honeymoon period going in your relationship, or at least the essence of it?
Oh, I love these questions. Oh, they're so good. What time do we have to finish? Okay, so yeah, I mean, look, a couple of things I want to speak to there that I think are really important. One is our culture, our kind of modern Western culture is unique as to the rest of the world, in that we look for that romantic love. And that's what you're talking about, that we look for that. We think that that's what we're looking for and that's what we need. And it gets us in trouble. There are a lot of other cultures, more traditional cultures, who don't prescribe to that way of relating and don't think of that as a necessary part of relationship. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have it and that it shouldn't be, but we have a disproportionate idea of how it's supposed to look in a relationship. Now, the reason for that is what that actually is a peak experience. It's when everything's elevated, and in a lot of other cultures, or in some other cultures that have ingrained in their culture a devotional way of living, they get that peak experience from their connection to the divine. So when they come to a relationship, that part of themselves is already fulfilled. So romance, although it's nice and it's lovely when it's there, sometimes it's not the most essential ingredient. Whereas in our culture, soon as that's gone, or if it's not there, then it's like we need our drug, we need our fix. But when we're able to cultivate and understand the difference between love and relationship and relating and how it all fits in, then we can cultivate a much more mature and much more holistic way of being in relationship, which is what I think you're talking about yourself there, Claire. So, you've come into a relationship that is more mature in that way. And can we, though, that's the next question that everyone always asks, but, I don't want to just be like sitting in my slippers all day, every day, and, not have any shebang. So, yes, we can have the shebang, but we need to understand how that works. What you're talking about isn't necessarily attraction. It's actually desire. We want to consider that desire is an element that we need to consider. Desire such a deep topic, but just very briefly and superficially, desire is something that we have often, and then it goes away, and we go, I want to feel that feeling where I want him so much, but you're like, he's in the other room in his slippers and, scratching his butt watching something, and the desire's not really there. So what we need to understand is what desire is. Desire is that feeling that we get when we really want something that we don't have. Because once we have it, so for instance, this glass of water, it's over there, and I'm like, oh, I'm so thirsty, I really want that. It's going to be so good when I have it. And that feeling that I'm experiencing, that's what we want, the actual desire. Then I get the glass of water, I'm like, drink it, and it's great, but I don't have the desire anymore. And I'm like, I want to desire you, but I've got you, but I want to desire you. So there's this back and forth, right? And so what we need to understand is that love and desire are kind of like two opposite ends of the pole. And love is all about security and safety and calm, and desire is all about wanting, not being secure and going after it. And so when you finally get into that relationship like you're in now, Claire, where that you're loved and that you're safe and that you're cherished, I mean, this is the most incredible honor to have. It really is. But you can still have desire, but we need to understand that it's not the grandest part of relationship. And so we can cultivate desire by understanding that we need to have separateness. There needs to be times where you don't inquire of what your partner's doing, and when you do things on your own, and there needs to be times where you get to watch your partner doing the thing that you don't have anything to do with, and just really have that space between you, the spaciousness between you. You were saying before, Claire, that I wrote that post, and I remember now, when that kind of breaking apart and having moments of that breaking apart and feel the desire and then coming together again. And there's really great things you can do to, when you're really comfortable with someone, there's games you can play and lots of things you can do to cultivate desire, but always coming back to love.
Because one of the questions that one of the women asked was, is there a way to bring attraction back into your relationship? So is this what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say that would answer that question. If she's watching and that doesn't answer a question, hello, just say. But I would imagine that answers that question, because attraction, what we think of as attraction is it's often that feeling of desire. Attraction is the thing that draws us to somebody, and then once we've got them, if we want to feel the desire to be drawn to them again, we need to have space to allow for that. And I think it's really important that we know, that we understand that desire or that feeling of attraction generally goes away because we've cultivated a lot of love.
I can definitely think from my experience that my partner's love language is space, and so he feels so loved when I give him space. And at the very start of giving him space, I really struggle. I have that feeling like, oh, he's leaving me, like that abandonment wound. But the moment that we're apart, I'm so happy. And I'm like, oh, I just want all this space all of the time. And so I know that's one way that we create, I guess, more attraction in our relationship, is a lot of space. However, I also know what really worked was actually what happened the day that Love in Quarantine was birthed. It was our 3-year anniversary. And I intentionally, at midnight the night before, just said, I'm going to make tomorrow a romantic day. Like, I actually had the intention to bring romance into our relationship the next day, because I was like, it's pretty boring at the moment. Like, we're all in love, but it's just eh. And so then at midnight, he's sound asleep because he likes to be in bed by 10 p.m. Well, at 10 p.m., I'm ready to go out and party. But he's asleep, and I get out my phone and I write this message, happy anniversary, babe. These are all the things that you can get from me tomorrow. Like, some were a bit naughty, some were like a walk on the beach. And then he got to tick them off throughout the day. And I forgot that when you actually really bring intention and play to your relationship, like when you were in the early stages of dating, where you actually really put in the intention to have a really great, sexy, fun, romantic time, you can actually recreate it. And I mean, that day was so beautiful. It was so sexy. It was raunchy. And then at night, I had the download to create this show. So a full creative baby came from just this intentional romantic days. So do you feel like that's another way that people could bring more romance into their relationship?
Absolutely. Well done, by the way. Good on you for taking the initiative and making that happen. It can be challenging when you're in your everyday life. It really can. But of course, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to complain about, feeling lethargic, but you never get up and go for a jog, well, then get over it, right? If you're complaining that there's no romance in your relationship, then do something to have something romantic. Absolutely. I think where the problem comes in, though, Claire, for a lot of people, is there's like this endemic issue, in the relationship, where they don't feel like they might do something like that, but it still doesn't spark anything. And I think when that's the case, we need to go a little bit deeper. But certainly, and especially in the initial phases of a relationship, or let's say the in-between phases, where, like you say, that that initial kind of spark has worn off, but you haven't yet gotten to, buying houses and having families and what have you. Keeping that momentum going, absolutely. Making sure that you have a regular date night. I mean, these are just really base kind of activities that we need to do, and my husband and I certainly do them. We still do them. We have a date night every week. Even if the nanny can't come, we'll have it at home once the baby's asleep. He's not a baby anymore, really, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, so actually creating your reality, not just kind of just sitting back and hoping some magic's going to happen. You actually have to put effort into your relationship.
Yeah.
And what's been really amazing is with these dates in Love in Quarantine is the women have actually had the creative license of actually creating the dates for Chris. And like one of the participants, I won't say who it is, I'll keep it anonymous, but she writes like love letters to Chris to go into the date, like writes handwritten letters and like sends me them to send to Chris for preparing for their date. And so just bringing your own creativity and your own juice to the relationship, I think also continues to, bring a spark.
Absolutely. And especially, one of the things that I say to my women is, buy your own golden bracelet. What I mean by that is, if you want him to do more, if you want him to be, because this is something that a lot of women say too, like, he's never doing anything, I'm putting in all the effort, right? That's another thing that I hear a lot. And so we need to then just kind of consider the attractive versus the directive polarity. And we so quickly and easily step into that directive polarity. And that's great at times. But if your issue is that it's not coming to you enough, then it's great to cultivate your attractive polarity and make sure that you engage with life in the way that you want life to engage with you. Mm-hmm. And that means, because men look to women unconsciously almost all of the time, sometimes consciously, but men look to women for guidance as to what to do for them and how to treat them. A man will see how you're living your life and what you're doing, and that's what they will think is going to be good for you. So if you want to be taken out for dinners and, showered with gifts, then you need to do that yourself. Be doing that in life. And then when a man comes to your birthday, the man's going to go, well, better take her somewhere nice to eat because that's what she likes to do. If you're the kind of person who, really loves poetry and going on beautiful romantic walks, then you need to make sure you're doing that, engage in that in your life, because then whatever men come into your life, they're going to be resonating on the same frequency for starters, but they also look to you for a map as to how to treat you. And what often happens when we get into a relationship, Claire, is that us women, we stop doing those things for ourselves, right? We start just, maintaining and getting busy and looking after. And so it's really important that we go, you know what? It's my cycle time. I'm going to take some days off and not do any housework, and I'm just going to do that. And, the more you do that, then you end up in a relationship with a man who's like tunes into you and says, oh, I'm going to give this woman some space right now. I'm going to bring her chocolate. My husband says sometimes, I'm just going to throw chocolate from the doorway. But it's very much so. But if you want, however you want a man to treat you, you have to keep treating yourself that way, and they'll take your lead.
Would you have any different tips? Because I know that we have also men watching. Would you have any different tips for men to women around this attraction piece before we move away from the topic of attraction?
Good luck. Kidding. No. I think that men, I love men. I just think they're such deep, sensitive, beautiful souls, and they really need to find their strength within to weather the chaos of the woman. And mostly I think they do a really great job. I think one of the hardest things for men is that they really genuinely want and need to please their woman. Like when their woman is happy, the world is good, and they take it personally, whether they've been the one to make us happy or not. They'll actually take it personally. But in the same breath, if we're sad, angry, or upset, they take that personally as well. So that's really hard for them. And I think it's really great for us women to understand that as well. So men, they really want to make women happy, and they need to cut themselves a little bit of slack, because mostly they do a pretty good job. When it comes to attraction, it's the same sort of thing. Men are attracted in the same sort of way that we are, exactly the same way. And remember though that men, they say that men are attracted to what they see, and that is true in many cases, not all, but many cases, and that comes down to genetic attraction as well. So that's one of the basal attractions that men just need to deal with, and understand that their body drives them to find a mate who's going to make good babies. And if that's what you're looking for, then go for it. But often it's not, or it might be one element of it. So really it's the same for men as it is for women in that way.
Mm-hmm.
In that way.
Amazing. So just to finish off this attraction piece, so just a reminder, or for anyone who's just joined on the call a little later, is that you've created this amazing quiz around attraction that will help. Is it for both men and women, the quiz?
Yep, the quiz is for both.
Okay, amazing. So if you're wanting that, just put in the word attraction if you haven't done that so far. And then what we're going to be doing is putting all the names into the sacred singing bowl. And then we're going to, after next Sunday's episode, we're going to be drawing a winner to actually win a really amazing audio program with you. Getting to know the love code. So can you tell us a bit about that program?
Sure, I'd love to. That program is specifically for women. Sorry, guys. But the great thing about this is if we've got men and women entering, if you're a man and you're in a relationship, you could gift it to your partner. And I promise you, every man who's had a partner do this program has been so grateful. And I've had so many men contact me to thank me for it. So, it'd be beneficial for you in that way. But the audio training, so it's a 3-hour long training, and it's a workshop in itself. It's kind of the precursor to the full 3-month Love Codes program. And it's epic in itself. We go deep into each of the codes. We unravel them. We learn tools and processes that will actually give you results right away and things that you can apply into your love life immediately. So it's applicable if you're single or if you're in a relationship, either way. A lot of women who've done this have had they've had really interesting outcomes. Most women who do my program end up in relationships or end up transforming the relationship that they're in. There's been a couple who've, finished relationships because that was what they needed to do and moved into more healthy relationships. But we look at what your blockages are. We start to reprogram some of the programs that are there from the past that might be, affecting your attraction and affecting your personal love program. So we'll look at each person has their own personal love program. You look at that a little bit in there. There's so much in there. It's 3 hours long. I recommend that you sit down and do it all in one go if you can, but you can kind of stop and come back to it.
Can you give us a little sneaky taster of what one of the love codes is? Like, I know that people are hearing, what are the love codes? Like, what's just one little sneaky?
Oh, which one? Oh, I'm going to feel bad if I don't. They're all going to get jealous, all the codes. Okay. Okay, so I think what's pertinent for what we're speaking about today is attractive persuasion. So one of the codes is called attractive persuasion, and it's where we learn as women, and I don't say too much because the men are watching too, and then they'll know your secret weapons. No kidding. Attractive persuasion is where we learn how we have been programmed to operate in the world that we operate in, which is a directive dominated world, or masculine dominated world. And this is fantastic. But when and this is why I say a lot of the women that I work with are extremely powerful. They can be in that directive energy and they can get shit done and do stuff in the world. So what we learn in attractive persuasion is how to embody your ability to be extremely open and draw to you the kind of love that you want. It has men around you who might have been around you for a long time but not really being the kind of man you want them to be. It affects them in a way that they start to transform. So if you have been single for a long time and you say there's no good men around, what you'll find happen immediately is you'll be starting to be surrounded by really high quality men who really want to step up and really want to take care of you and can take care of you. And it's not necessarily because it's different men, that can be the case, but it's often the men who are around you transform. So there's some really deep kind of feminine secrets that we go into that I'm not going to divulge right now, but it's a very powerful state that's innate in women, and you will start to unlock that in the audio training and in attractive persuasion. And if you're in a relationship, what happens is when you're embodying that attractive persuasion, the man that you're with will also transform. So you'll start to understand how the feminine part of a relationship is really the part that has the fair share of power. But it's in a very different way to what we've been told and how we've learned. And so we can start to really access that. And you find yourself not having to do much, in fact, doing far less, and just having this very profound effect on the men around you and then them feeding that back to you.
Amazing. Well, if you're watching live or the replay and you would love to win this audio, just put in love codes into the comments, and we'll put all of the names into the sacred singing bowl. But yes, everyone will get also a copy of the attraction quiz to start them off. So some of the sisters on the show and some of the audience members have sent in some questions, so we're going to delve into them. So Courtney, one of the audience members, asked, why are some people only attracted to others when they're being held at arm's length and deprioritized, or just not interested? Is it possible to change that, and how?
Absolutely. I mean, how long do you have though, Courtney? Let's go. Yeah, oh geez, it's an age-old one really, isn't it? Like why it's like why we're always attracted to the bad ones. But specifically being held at arm's length, I'll speak specifically to that. But what I'm going to say could really relate to any kind of negative pattern. So if you're always attracted to the same kind of situation that isn't really fulfilling for you, and that's really frustrating, right? Because it's like, you're a smart person, this isn't good for you, but you can't help but feel attracted to them. Now, this can come from a few different places, but mostly this comes from a toxic kind of patterned attraction style. So at some point, for a lot of us, when we're growing up, like I said before, we create a map of relationships, and in the same way, we create a map of what love is. And again, where do we get that from? We get that from our primary caregivers and how we felt when we were with that person or with those people. Now, it's not necessarily, we don't necessarily clock or map who they are and what they do. So we don't go around looking for a cookie cutter of our dad or our mum or our caregiver, but what we do clock is how we feel. So even if I was abused by a parent when I was growing up, then clearly that's not good or healthy, but as a very small child, it's essential to our survival that we're loved. It's actually essential. So our psyche will convince us that how I feel with this person equals love. And that's a really smart thing to do when you're a kid, and it's essential for your survival. The problem with that is we then take that coding, we take that programming with us, that however I feel. So let's say this person had a primary caregiver with whom they felt they could never really connect. Maybe they were a bit distant, or maybe they didn't live with them, or whatever it was that gave that person the feeling of never really being able to connect. And so that feeling is the thing that they have programmed as meaning love. And so unconsciously, their unconscious mind is always going to be looking for experiences that are going to feed them in the experience of love, even though it's a negative idea of love. This is one of the most common reasons people will be attracted to a negative experience. And that's why it's, the person the next person you're attracted to might look very different and be very different, but the experience ends up being the same, because it's the unconscious mind that is attracted to an unconscious and invisible pattern. Oh, I've lost your sound, honey.
Oh.
There you go, you're back.
So how do we go about actually changing that pattern?
It's such a big question. Let me see if I can answer that and give you something for right now. Really, that is, you need to do some deprogramming. That's what needs to happen. One of the great things, what you talked about, Claire, the 4-man plan, letting yourself going on dates with people that you wouldn't normally go on dates with, that is a really great way to start that kind of ball rolling. And I always say to my women, that you have a 3-date commitment. Unless the person you're going to date with is repulsive, or scary, then go again and go again, because that just gives you an opportunity to entrain yourself to a different experience. So yeah, dating people that you wouldn't normally date. Also saying, going on multiple dates with someone, so long as they're not awful, is one way to do it. We need to create new patterns. We need to create new programs. So having experiences with different people, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to treat yourself in a way that's going to cultivate deep self-worth. Now that's what I say, it's a big question, because it really is. And when we start working on relationships, we start up here and then we go right down here. So, self-worth, I mean, I've worked with a lot of different types of people, and some people, might think that we have great self-worth, but, I could wager a bet that most of us don't, because it really comes from our initial sense of being separated from oneness. So unless, you have alleviated that sense of separation from the oneness, then we've all got things around self-worth to work on. And so bringing some attention to that and cultivating and really feeding your sense of self-worth is also going to change that. Recognizing that there may be an element of desire, that you may be addicted to desire. Remember that feelings that we have chemicals that go with them, hormones, and we do literally get addicted to them. That's how we create programs and patterns. So, you know, you may have an addiction to desire, and arm's length, well, that's a great recipe for desire. But recognizing that changes things around. Oh, that's not love. That's not even necessarily attraction. That's desire. Okay, well, let's recategorize that in the unconscious.
Mm. And one of the sisters from the show's question was actually, why do we attract in romantic partners that are so similar to our parents, or we're playing out that mother wound or that father wound? And I guess my question also with that is, are we meant to then continue on having a relationship with someone to maybe heal this wound? Or are we then trying, is the goal to actually be with someone that we're not playing out this wound with?
Great question. Another great question. I see this especially so much in our kind of spiritual community, and I'm really glad you brought it up, actually, because I think we can all learn from this and grow a lot. This is a karmic attraction, and it's when you're attracted to someone who you feel, you know, that you're going to have something to learn from them, to grow from them. And they can be really enjoyable, but they can also be extremely frustrating, because we only grow through, you know, stretching our boundaries. But they're always short-lived, because they're karmic. So once you've learned your lesson, it's over. Okay, now that's one area, but then you will hopefully get to a point in your life where we want to move beyond karmic relationships, full stop. Because if you keep doing karmic relationships because you want to heal those things in yourself, you're going to do them forever, because you will have karma that goes forever. So there comes a time when it's really helpful to make a decision as to what you want a relationship for. Now, if you get to a point where you say, I want a relationship so that I can have a lifelong partner with whom I feel I'm in a sanctuary with, then no longer do I need to learn my life lessons through my relationship. I'll learn them from outside of the relationship. Let the relationship be a sacred space that I come home to rest. Mm. And I think this is extremely helpful for a lot of us to hear.
Oh, I love that. So that also sort of comes back down to intention of what you're actually creating.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I totally hear that, especially in, you know, with my friends and communities, that everything is meant to be, you know, for our spiritual growth. And so then every area is so challenging. But it's actually okay to have a part of our life where it isn't just huge growth every single week. There's this whole new challenge, or as you're saying, this whole new karmic lesson.
And, you know, might I even suggest that the greatest spiritual growth that we get is when we get to the point, or the greatest, what we're really reaching for in our spiritual evolution is getting to a point when we recognize that the human part of us is always going to be imperfect, and it's about choosing to live as an evolved being, choosing to live as an awakened soul, which means choosing to live in the vibration of love. And that doesn't mean you're constantly having to go through your shit. It means that when you get to that kind of frequency and living in that frequency and having a relationship that is a crucible for evolution, then when you see those reflections of yourself, you don't have to battle with them. You're able to love them and drop them. And that's what we're going for, right? So, you know, my suggestion or my invitation is, well, let's just go for that rather than riding on the old treadmill.
Amazing. So another question from an audience member, and she asks, and I know I definitely resonate with this question in my own way, and I'm sure that so many people will as well. I often feel like too much for the guys I attract, because they're either not spiritual and I'm super weird, wacky, witchy. So how do I overcome the too much wound? And I definitely can relate to that, because being a performer, I know you can relate to that. I'm a big energy. I like being the center of attention. but with that comes feeling like I'm too much. And yeah, so what work have you done with people around the too much wound?
Yeah, well, I understand that. Firstly, I think, depending on how old this person is, but I imagine they're not in their teens, so we'll be watching the show.
In their
And
30s, I think. Yeah.
for a lot of us women who are really powerful and outspoken and have a lot of strong energy, and have maybe had that experience, whether it's been from inside our own selves or projected to us from the outside world, the first thing we need to do is realize that there might be an attachment to it. We might actually be identifying with it now. And I've seen it happen a lot. It's happened to myself. And I would suggest, with so much love to this woman, if you're genuinely wanting to be in a relationship where you're met, have a look at that and see if you can drop your identity with it, because that's the first place, and probably 90% of it. And then outside of that, I encourage you actually then to see, do you still get that information from anywhere? If you drop your identity with it, where do you get that information from? Do people still tell you that, or do they not tell you that? And then because when you change your relationship to yourself with that part of yourself, it's almost like, it's like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. All of a sudden you're in a different world, and the people around you, you hear what they've always been saying. Oh no, I think you're amazing just the way you are. But you hear that as code for, oh yeah, you're amazing, but I just don't want to be around you too much because you're so goddamn full on. They're not actually saying that, but we only hear what our own relationship is to that part of ourselves. So when you drop your identity with that part of yourself, you'll start to see things shift a little bit. And then I encourage you to ask yourself, where are you too full on for yourself? Are there parts of you that you are too full on for yourself? Do you exhaust yourself sometimes? And if you do, then take time to stop and settle and have some space and be quiet. Or do you want to be loud and vivacious? And if you do, then take away the labels that you have around it, because what does too full on mean? Now, if you really delve deep around what that means in a negative sense, it would mean things like bulldozing, so not listening to others, and oversharing, which comes with an insensitivity to social energy or shared energy. And they're things that actually might be really worth looking at. If that's happening, then that could be really insensitive to the people around you. But if we're in judgment of ourselves about being too full on, we're never going to get to see the intricacies of what's really going on for us around it and being able to accept that part of ourselves.
I love that. I mean, I relate so much to being a big energy, and actually did have men tell me that I was intimidating, like not while we were dating, but then maybe like a few months afterwards, I'd be like, I would actually say, oh, why didn't it work out with us? And I'm like, I was just too intimidated by you. And I then started that story. But what was really interesting was that I got together with my partner after he'd had a crush on me for a long time, and he did sort of put me on the pedestal of being the performer and the speaker and the entrepreneur. But we actually got together at Confest, at the very first time I went to Confest, camping. And for me, this was totally out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Wasn't wearing makeup, wasn't performing on a stage, was feeling, because I'm quite socially anxious in big crowds, especially when I'm not performing and speaking. And so when we actually got together, I was in a very different part of myself. And I was a lot more surrendered and, a little awkward. And, these different parts where he then, in that moment, even though he'd seen me in all these different colours and loved me in all those colours, we actually connected at a moment when I'd really dropped all of that. And for me, I needed to go to a camping festival to drop it. But it was also funny because for the days leading up to us getting together, I'd had my heart broken and I dropped so many different masks that I literally wasn't too much anymore. I was just like, all I've got left is me, and just showing up as me, and someone will just have to meet me as me. And that was when it happened.
That's intimacy. That's intimacy. When you're a big energy like that it can be hard for people to see into who you really are. And how many women like that, Claire, do you know, who are big energies, that say that when you really get to know them, actually they're the most sensitive, kind of vulnerable creatures, you know, and this big energy often is covering a little bit of that up. Yeah, right. Me too. And so, you know, and that's another thing. It just depends on how committed you are to this. It's like, if you really want to attract a man who's in his directive energy, you need to get into your attractive energy when you're with them. You need to open up. You need to allow them to see the parts of you that are vulnerable, like you're saying. And when I talk about, I avoid that word a little bit because I think it's been overused. And when I say vulnerable, I don't mean about having to tell everyone about or tell him about all the things that make you sad. I just mean be awkward. You know, don't be the one who's always in the power position. And that can allow a man to see you. I mean, I love that story. I knew that story and I love that story so much.
Trust me trying to put up a tent or anything to do with camping, I was just awkward.
Because you've got to remember that men, like I said before, men want to make women happy. Men want to be a hero. They want to be your hero. They genuinely do want to. And we want them to as well, right? Like, we want a man to be like, I'll take care of things and I've got this. You know, we love that. And so if you're always taking up all of the space and getting shit done and being onto it, then they don't actually have a space to step up for you. So, like, you know, for you, you know, men love it when they can help you put up the tent or whatever it is, do your taxes, or, you know, they love that. And especially if you receive it with gratitude, wow, what a turn on for them. And for you, right? So all these big women, we're always going around going, oh, but I just want a man to step up, you know? And it's like, well, as soon as you step down a little bit, there's a bit of a spot for him to step into.
I love that. And any advice for men around, you know, a similar, maybe like not the too much, but yeah, for men, like sort of role reverse, any tips for men?
Yeah, absolutely. So when a man is feeling kind of emasculated from a woman, that's a similar situation. So when a man, you know, is trying and he feels like he just can never win. I mean, that age-old saying, right? And then he starts to give up. And then he can find himself either, well, there's two things he can do. Either he usually will give up and he kind of gets pushed into the more passive or attractive or feminine role. And then the woman just starts, you know, going on and like getting more mean and more pushy about, well, why can't you do this and why can't you do that? And then they get grumpy and then they're just angry all the time. And so the men just feel like, well, I can't win, so I'm just going to give up. And they do, and they stop trying, and then the attraction's gone, the polarity's gone, and it's over. The other thing that they can do is hold to their masculine energy, hold to that directive energy. Now, what will happen here is either the woman will stay in the directive energy, and you'll end up fighting, and you might have really great sex, but but you'll, you know, that's not a great outcome. You don't want to be fighting all the time, but she'll still be attracted to you, and that's the difference. Because when you are both in the same polarity, if you both stepped into the masculine, you're not going to, there's going to be a repulsion, but there's still fireworks. Now, if you step into the feminine and the woman's in the masculine, there's not going to be any attraction between you. Now, if you're both in your masculine or directive energy, it's not going to work. It's going to be a battlefield. But what can happen when a man stays in this energy is that, and what normally happens is that she'll be compelled into the attractive dynamic. And it happens both ways. So only one person needs to really be doing the work strongly. But if you give up, and that's what a lot of men do, is they just kind of give up. And that's because a lot of women have extremely strong directive energy. It's not their fault. This is how we've been reared and programmed. But, you know, I just want to kind of flag there's a danger there in that sounding like a man should just let a woman go crazy and he should just stand his ground. No, that is not the case at all. This is not about allowing yourself to be treated badly. You know, staying in your masculine directive energy may be to say, no, you know, I will not accept that. Bugger off. I'm out of here, and walk out the door, or whatever you need to do. That being directive doesn't mean I need to be a man, so I need to let you be all emotional and crazy, and that's not okay.
Yeah, I definitely know I feel more attracted to my partner when he really stands in that and sets his boundaries, and also on the other hand actually allows himself to be soft and emotional, and actually show how he's truthfully feeling, which I know that, you know, men can struggle with because that isn't what they're taught is attractive. But those two kind of polar opposites is definitely when I feel the most connected to my partner.
Yeah, and let's remember that in an evolved relationship, these polarities aren't stagnant. So it's not that, you know, I'm always going to be an attractive polarity, my partner's always going to be indirective. But the real and this is getting deep into actual relationships. The real mastery is when you have brought your energy together enough that you're able to play that dance together and you're able to yield and direct together. But that is, you know, in the initial stages of relationship. And I think a lot of the people watching this show, especially, are probably at that point where, like, well, how do I attract the right relationship? You need to, like Claire says, you need to think of your intention. Okay, do I want to be in a relationship where I'm always the one doing the thing, or do I want to be in a relationship where I'm taken care of? And so embody that, find that for yourself, and that's, you know, it's going to make a difference. And then certainly, you know, in relationship, you know, we're evolving so that we can access the, and we do this in my 3-month program. We really learn how to access our masculine or directive self, and then drop it and access the feminine and attractive self, and then drop it. So we learn that dexterity between the two rather than getting stuck.
Is that what a few of the women in the show might need to do? So a few of the women on Sunday night for Shadow Week were talking about that they're so busy in their life as entrepreneurs and in their work, and they're passionate about so many things, and they're actually quite happy doing all of these things, but they don't really have the space to create the partner, or when there is that opportunity to be with a man, they've been practicing this busy energy all the time that they can't necessarily fully then surrender and change their energy.
Yeah.
Is that
100%?
Correct?
Yeah. I mean, just the last program I ran, where you should have seen these dynamic women. Oh my God, like powerhouses, like really amazing women. And I'm just thinking, all of them were in that energy really strongly, and a couple of them like extremely, like very powerful positions in what they do. And they ended up, I'm thinking of two in particular, I'll talk about one in particular. She's ended up in a long-term relationship with this guy who is nothing like she has ever dated before, and she was so happy. And it really was, I remember she got to a point, I'm not going to say her name in case someone knows it, she got to a point when she said, she was just talking. She said something like, you know, I don't even have time. And I just sat there and said nothing for ages. I just wanted her to hear what she said. And genuinely, she went, oh, so even if I met someone, there's no space for them to be in my life. And we need to realize how poignant that is. Like, that's not just like a scheduling issue on the 3-dimensional level. If you remember that we're living in a quantum field of energetic dynamics, if yours is full with all of these kind of matrices everywhere, then there's no space for any other energy to come in, then you're stuffed. So we need to make space, but not just space. We need to embody that attractive polarity so that you start to draw the energy towards you, but there needs to be space for it first. Now, for these really dynamic women who are used to being really busy and doing a lot and being in that directive energy, you have to practice being in that attractive quality. You have to practice with every man that you meet, with yourself and your everyday life, so that it becomes natural. And it is innate. So for most women, when you first start doing it, it can feel a bit weird or clunky. But after a little while, most women go, oh my God, now I feel like I'm actually being myself. So yes, for the women on the show, you know, I would say for the women who have that experience, step back, step down, open up, relax and soften your body. Like, that's one way to start, you know, accessing those parts of yourself. And you might get scared. And being vulnerable is scary for a lot of people because it makes us feel unsafe. And one of the codes actually in my love codes is safety and vulnerability. And there is a way actually. I mean, that's a big thing. I'm not going to open up that can of worms, but we need to try and find a way to feel safe and vulnerable at the same time. And you can do that. And remember, though, that vulnerability isn't a show. It's not something that we do to get brownie points. If you're not feeling slightly terrified, then it's not really your vulnerability.
I love that. So just a couple of questions to finish off. So we've already delved a bit into this, but maybe you'll have a little more insight. So one of the women on the show just said that she's confused about all the mixed messaging online about the feminine and the masculine. And so she's wondering, in dating and relationships, how important is an awareness of our feminine and masculine energy?
Oh, it's another great question. I think it's sad, because it's just poor terminology. And we talk about it as feminine and masculine, but really what we're talking about is polarity. And if you look at magnets, the positive and negative attract, and the positives repel and the negatives repel. It's just basic electrical chemistry, really. So it is the same when it comes to relationships. It really is. Do you need to understand masculine and feminine? I think if your relationship life is awesome, then no, just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're struggling and you've heard this a few times and it's kind of caught your attention, then I'd say, well, yes, there's probably something you can learn from it. It is confusing though, because everyone's talking about masculine and feminine, and I think it's gotten very confused. But if I can give you one kind of little anchor to come back to if you're reading something or experiencing something, just make sure it can keep relating back to polarity and understanding that if you look at the anatomy of a man and a woman, it gives you a good indication. The feminine polarity, I call it the attractive polarity, because it's less confusing. The attractive polarity is open and receives, and the directive polarity penetrates. And we have both. All men and women have both masculine and feminine, or attractive and directive qualities. But when you're in a relationship with someone, you're trying to balance this connection between the two of you. And so you do want to be able to either be in attractive and directive energy all the time, or learn how to navigate between the two. But as I said before, most of the women that I work with, in fact, the vast majority of women that I work with and that come to me, are embodying that directive energy all of the time. Even women who think that they're not, because they might do their hair nice or that kind of thing. Most women are embodying that because that is the world that we're in, and we have been programmed to be directive, assertive, productive, all these things. And we want to have men. And so a lot of these women say, I want a man who's going to step up and take charge. So if you want that, you need to step more into the attractive quality, which is receptive and collaborative. It's creative, and really embody that more. And what it's going to do, because we're polarities and we're poles and magnets, you're going to attract a man who's capable at least of embodying that directive energy. And then once you start to dance together, then you start to navigate how you move in and out of those spaces with each other.
It just came to me that also one piece of the puzzle, I just got kind of audience members' questions kind of just coming into my field here. And they're saying, I've been doing all of that, Claire, and it's still not working. And just a little quick little snippet of a story that might just help someone in the audience, as I just keep hearing these audience voices in the background, was that I kept attracting in gay men. That was my pattern. And really attractive and really beautiful gay men. A lot of the time they didn't even realize they were gay, and then they came out at some point. I loved being that woman, helping a man to come out. Or in turn I was attracting in straight men that just either really couldn't commit, and all these different stories. And the funny thing was that I still wasn't telling the truth to the world about my story with my breast.
Mm-hmm.
And because I wasn't being honest with myself, my lovers, with people around me, I wasn't, and I just fully wasn't living my most truthful life. And I was just really living all of my passions, what I really wanted to do in this world. I just kept attracting people that did not match, to the point that most of them were gay, or just were, we lived in different countries, or, there was always these really big mismatches. But the more I told my truth, the more honest I was, the more honest I was with what I wanted to create, the more I started embodying the traits in myself that I thought I wanted in another man. And the more I went on that journey, the more men that were straight, so that was one good thing, but actually men that lived in my state were straight and actually looking for a monogamous committed relationship actually come into my field. And so would you say that that's also like another piece of the puzzle, is your own authenticity? Like, we're wanting to attract these authentic relationships, but you're not really owning your own authentic path. How can you actually magnetize an authentic relationship?
Yes. And this will look different for everybody. So some people will be hearing your story and saying, well, how do I speak my truth all the time? Now, you don't have to speak your truth all the time, but you need to feel it. You need to be honest with yourself as to who you are and what you're feeling. And being authentic changes. Being authentic doesn't mean I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. Being authentic means speaking or engaging and relating to somebody how you authentically truly feel in that moment. That's what being authentic means. And the other thing that I want to flag here, though, is this is important. Don't take lightly how challenging it is to reprogram yourself into healthy relationships. The programming that we have is so deeply unconscious that reading a few books and doing a couple of courses is not, generally for most people, it's not enough. It really is, and I say this from the bottom of my heart. I've worked in this field for 20 years, and I've worked with people with extremely damaging psychological issues. And relationships, next to health, relationships are the most important and impactful thing in our lives. And to have a healthy relationship, we have to do a lot of work. And that's not because relationships are a lot of work. No, relationships actually in their native way are beautiful and they flow. And there's much more ease in them than there is challenge. But to get to that point, we have a lot of uncovering that we have to do and reprogramming. And to be honest with you, I don't think most people can do that on their own. I think most people really do need to have some help, because our unconscious patterns are unconscious. We can't get to them on our own most of the time. Not all of us. But if you are thinking, I've done this a million times and it hasn't worked, you probably need help. You need some guidance through those unconscious patterns and into those dark places that you're unaware of. And I don't mean about going into heart-wrenching stories. No, not at all. But just some, a lot of us need some help.
No, I love that. Okay, final question. So, so this is a two-part question. One's more early stage of dating, and then one's a tiny bit further on. So the first is about ghosting. So why someone is really into you for a few dates and then all of a sudden stops contact.
Wouldn't it be nice if there was just one answer to that?
Yeah, I just thought that, you just had the magic pill, Belinda. Like, you just have a chocolate and just all magically changes, doesn't it?
There's no one answer to that. How can we stop it happening might be a better question, or a more helpful question, because realistically, why does someone do that? It depends on the person. It depends on so much, right? So how can we stop that happening? how can we stop ourselves from being ghosted? Well, firstly, see the signs, because you'll see them and probably be ignoring them and avoiding them. And secondly is to be circular dating. So don't just be seeing one guy at a time, because if you're seeing that one guy, like you said, Claire, you've got all your eggs in one basket. I love that analogy. You got all your eggs in one basket. And if he does or doesn't call, whatever, it's going to pull you apart. Now, if you're dating 3 or 4 people at one time, then when that person doesn't get back to you, or just, you're like, well, next. And you genuinely don't care as much. And I can tell you this from my own experience. I've been there too. And that is the best way to deal with ghosting, because thinking about, well, what was he thinking, and where did I go wrong, and where was he coming from, but he really liked me, and it's going to drive you freaking mental. And the point is, and this is my favorite, so many women say, but he was perfect for me. Remember this: if he's not calling you back, he's not perfect for you.
Yeah.
So ghosting is going to happen. You cannot work out why the different reasons different people do it. And anyone who tells you they can tell you, they're lying. But just instead, let's focus on, well, how do I deal with it so that it doesn't tear me apart?
Yeah, I love that. And so then that was a question from one of the sisters on the show, but then one of the others wanted it more about a bit further on, where you've been dating for a while, you've been getting along really well, and then you start sleeping with each other, and then the same thing happens. Once they've had sex and they've got intimate, then the man runs away and either just says, I want to stop seeing you, or I just want to be friends. And they keep repeating that kind of pattern. If you just have any tips with that.
Sure. Well, I would say if it's a repeated pattern, so if it's a one-off thing, then again, we can't say. That would just be, it would be a cookie cutter approach. But if that's something that keeps on happening to you, then it would be something within yourself, because it's happening to you. You're attracting the same kind of experience. And so what about that experience is reflecting or resonating with you? What if that experience is feeding your story? That men are only interested in one thing. Do you believe that? And if you do, then that's a belief that you're going to need to change. I had one participant in my program recently who had that experience all the time. She's so gorgeous, this woman. And she's just done the 360. She used to use innuendos a lot. She was very sexual in her way of being with men, just because it was fun. And she's a very flirtatious woman when you meet her. She's gorgeous. But that always happened. And we discovered that she believed that that's where her worth was in her sexuality. Now, this was not a small realization for someone to have, it tore her apart. And when she rebuilt herself, she's now like, no sexual innuendo. And you don't have to go to the extreme, but she really has. And she now has really lovely, lovely men always, lovely men approaching her and asking her on dates and doing the right thing and taking her somewhere, really doing the right thing. So yeah, if this is happening for you, you're dating, it's going really well, and then all of a sudden you have sex and he's out the door. And if it is that, and I would say again, I'd want to have a conversation with the person to see what they're not seeing. So what this woman isn't seeing. So what else is happening as well, not just that. And what story have you told yourself about it? And we need to change the story, the belief that you have around it. And that's a really common one too. It really is common that we think men really only want us for one thing. They don't. Well, actually they do. Most men want a woman for a very particular thing, but it's not sex. However, they tend to think they're going to get the thing that they want through sex. So it's a little bit confusing. Anyhow, that I think that's probably the best way I can answer that question.
But what is the thing then that men really want?
Well, actually, the person who wins the 3-hour audio training will dive really deep into that, because it is in the audio training. And I'm just seeing how I can share this with the audience in a way that's going to uphold its integrity without having the time to give the kind of, understanding. But let's just say that women innately, or the feminine innately, has a very direct connection to the divine. When we're able to embody our natural and native state, which we don't because we've been masculinized, but when we're able to do that, when we do that, we have a very direct connection to the divine. And it's our natural way for a man to seek out a woman to access that inner treasure. And it's unconscious, and it's basically in our DNA. Now, where most people are completely unaware of this, and men as well, and that drive often relates, they often feel it as a need to want to have sex. And what happens then if a man has sex with a woman but she hasn't been able to open up that space inside of her, and for him to be able to directly connect to that, but the sex happens, then the sex is there but the connection's not, and so it's like it didn't work for him. This is all very deeply unconscious patterns, and I was obviously reluctant to speak about it because you really need to, it's really important to understand all the kind of intricate foundation to really get to that point. But that's just a little taster as to what that is.
Oh, I really, really love that answer though. And yeah, I mean, I also just hear that when I'm really in my essence, like I'm really in my true essence, I'm so connected to the divine, and that is really what the men, especially in my later years of dating, I felt have been so attracted to me. Like obviously it's probably been happening the whole time, but I started to really see that. I was like, oh, you're really connected, you're really attracted to me because you want to be connected to God. Like we want to be connected to God together.
That's it. That's it. And women, when we understand that that's the power in relationship, and then do all the work, and it's work to take off that masculinization and that accessing the directive state, it's a profound change. And I know a lot of women who are watching might think, oh yeah, but I'm doing that spiritual work. It's often not what you think it is. You know, it's not about spiritualizing. It's about being in touch with your raw feeling, as opposed to your emotion. It's about being authentic in the moment. You know, there's so many things, and it doesn't always look the way you think it will. One of the greatest kind of indications towards this I love is when you look into some of the ancient spiritual traditions, they know this, right? Like there's some traditions where you're not allowed to touch a woman when she's menstruating, and of course our Western mind goes, that's just not right, the women aren't dirty. But in most cultures, if you look deeply into it, where that comes from is because they believe that a woman when she's menstrual is in her most sacred time, and you must not touch her because she's sacred. The traditional Kabbalists believe that the women aren't allowed to read Kabbalah. This is traditionally. And why is that? Not because they're not going to understand it, but because they believe that woman is so innately connected to God that reading something would just muddy up her already very profound and clear connection to the divine. It's there, it's in our history, and we in our Western culture, we have some very strong de-armoring to do.
So I've just noticed the time that we really need to wrap up. I do have a few more questions, but I think we're going to leave that there. We can maybe dive into them more on Sunday evening. But thank you so much, Belinda. I would love to hear comments from the audience, what your biggest insight has been. I mean, I'm sure there's been many, but I would love to hear about them in the comments, whether you're watching the replay or watching live. And while they're doing that, Belinda, what's the best way for people to stay in touch with you?
Well, of course, you could always go over to my website, belindabailey.com. Facebook's probably the best way. Make sure, though, that you go to my page and not my profile, because I'm not on my profile very much. But if you go over to my page, which is, I think it's Juicy Relating. I don't even remember the URL, but you'll find me. It's under Belinda Bailey. And there's loads on there. I have a group as well called The Physics of Love and Relationship. And that's a great group to be in because I do a lot of special kind of offers in there, and I do some lives, and I share a lot of my content in there. I share a lot of my content for free. I just want to share it with people. So if you follow me in any of these areas, you'll get onto it. You can also, of course, buy that 3-hour audio training that's available on my website. And I do run a 3-month Love Codes program. That's a very intensive program. It's application based. So I only run a certain amount throughout the year, and there's a bit of a filtration process, like I said before, just to make sure that women who come and do that have done quite a bit of self-development already. And I don't really work one-on-one with people. I do if they've done my courses, then there's a few spots that open up each year for that. But my courses and programs are the way to do my deeper work, really.
Amazing. So just to finish off, if you were going to die tomorrow, what would be your message for the world?
Fucking hell. That's a big question, isn't it? Okay, what would be my message for the world? If I was going to die tomorrow. That love is not what you think it is. And it is the thing that creates everything in the world.
I just love the answers that come out from that question. Thank you so much, Belinda. So Belinda will be joining us on Sunday evening for our season finale. We are very excited to see how the show will finish on Sunday. I don't think I even know how the show is going to finish, because God just every week just channels the show, and it's like, I'm still listening to how the last episode is going to go. But we definitely know that you're featuring on the show and going to be bringing lots of tips to the participants around attraction as they go into their final sharings to see if there's any alignment with Chris. So we really hope that everyone watching live with the replay now is going to join us live on Sunday night. We've got lots of prizes for people that join us live for our last episode. And I'm just so excited to see how it's all going to finish. Because I've got no idea. So thank you so much, Belinda. It's just been such a joy to have this chat with you this evening. And if you've enjoyed it, please let your friends know about it. And we look forward to seeing you all on Sunday. So sending everyone lots of love.